How you going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Resto Shed. Now, I think it's been about 5 months since I've done a video on this car, and for good reason too. I've just been absolutely flat out doing other things away from home, and I haven't had a lot of time for this one at the moment. So I was going to break this video up into 2 parts, but I thought it had been this long, so I might as well just keep going. This is what we've come up with. So getting on with the job, painting the dash because I wanted to get the shell out of the shed, and this was the next thing to do, I suppose. So yeah, basically the dash had been painted once before in black, assuming it was acrylic because it rubbed up like the rest of the dash, which was still the original paint. So yeah, I gave it a good 180, feathered out anything I needed to feather out, and a 320'd it, put on some acrylic primer. I let that cure off for about an hour or so. It was bloody stinking hot when I started this video. Obviously we're in winter now, so it's been a while. I gave the primer a 600, prep sold it down, and yeah, on with the chestnut brown dual on top coat. So what I'm spraying this with is actually a knockoff of a GDI Pro Light. It's a 1.3 setup. It actually doesn't need a whole lot of pressure or anything to spray this kind of stuff. So I find it really helpful for this kind of stuff because you can kind of mask things up a bit loosely and you don't have to worry about your paper and plastic blowing around a whole lot. So yeah, for this 100% that's my go-to gun. It's become a bit of a workhorse these days. I've just about sprayed everything I can through it, so yeah, it does a pretty good job, I reckon. So there's the finish of it. Originally when I had this colour mixed up, it was actually way too shiny, so I ended up having it matted out a bit more to match sort of the factory suede kind of finish that is meant to be used on the dash, because obviously if you have something that's too glossy, it's going to reflect the sun and it's just going to blind you while you're driving. So it's really important to get that sheen at the right level. So now that I've got that one out of the way, I can sort of focus on my next panel that I want to get fitted to the car, which will be the boot lid. And the reason why I'm starting with the boot lid is because it can just go straight onto the car. I don't need to, get 3 other panels ready, or, I don't find any sense in, say, spraying the inside of the nose cone and then that sitting around on a trestle for the next however long. So that's the reason why I started with the boot lid. Now, because I'd never re-primed the boot lid after I'd rubbed it, I ended up giving it a guide coat, blocking it back down again with some 240, and basically just putting some 2K primer on it, just so when it comes time to painting this car, I've got something that I can just give, a good 500, 800, and then it's ready for paint. So the reason why I decided to go with that 2K primer on this one instead of painting over the top of the Resto finish is because I just want something that I can just rub really easily. I think with the Resto finish primer, I think it will be too hard to get the 400, the 500, the 600, the 800 grit scratches out if I decide to go that way. Whereas rubbing this stuff where it's a bit easier to rub, and because I'm basically just spraying like a primer sealer over the top of it, I'm not really getting a whole lot of texture in the primer, I find. This is getting sprayed through a 1.3, so obviously it's reduced down a little bit. It's going to lay out a lot flatter. It's not going to have that texture that a high build would typically have. So I'll basically just be able to give it a rub with some 500 and then finish it off with 800 grit, and then it's ready to paint. Because like I said, I'm not rubbing out any texture, I'm not blocking out any repairs. The panel is straight, it's perfect. I just needed to put something on it just to give me something to rub later in the future. Now, I suppose we'll see if there's any YouTube superstars who want to turn that into some sort of sexual innuendo like they normally do. So moving on with the underside of the boot lid now, because like I said, this is going to be my first panel I get painted. There was a few little dents that I just wanted to pick up, before I start putting any colour on. Again, this isn't the show car, but I like things to be neat and tidy. I don't like to see, stuff that could have been fixed, before I put colour on. So a little bit of filler work, give that a nice rub, and put on some 2K primer, something else for me to rub, and then it's ready for paint. So there's a look of the primer after, I think I put 3 coats on this one. It just basically to give myself something to rub, something to seal off that filler work that I did on the inside of this boot lid. Now I found that I had a few little pinholes in my filler work. You know, it happens. So what I like to do is I like to give those areas a bit of a scotch up, mix up some fine fill, and then just wipe it in real lightly before I start actually prepping up the rest of the panel. Now, the reason why I do that before I go and prep up the rest of the panel is because if I go and rub everything like I'm getting it ready for paint and then try and wipe in those little pinholed areas, what will happen is I'll actually end up digging a little hole in around where those pinholes were, and it will actually sharpen the finish. So get them now, block that flat, and then rub the rest of the panel is definitely the way to go, I find, for this kind of stuff.
Buford, you listening? Now get this. That's when the subcommittee had to reallocate the funds, and then...
Now, I wanted to paint this one basically as soon as possible, so I ended up chucking it out in the sun, getting some UVs into it, curing that primer, making it hard, ready to rub. Now, going back to when I originally blocked down the whole car, when it was, you know, a complete shell, I wasn't 100% happy with the line on this bonnet right at the front. I just found it sort of changed in transition just slightly. So I ended up putting a little bit more filler in it just to sort of bring that up, just a smidge. You'll see, you know, later in the video that it's like absolutely sweet nothing of filler. It was basically just wanting to correct that line just a little bit, and yeah, I think I managed that pretty well. As you can see, I'm using my little, it's a bit of a wooden dowel, you know, a bit thinner than a broom handle, just to sort of block up to that line where my tape is, and then obviously reversing the tape, and yeah, it's does the trick, I find, pretty well for HQ bonnets. So exactly the same process as the boot lid. Ended up giving the whole bonnet a guide coat, blocked it down with 240, and then on with some primer surfacer, sort of seal off anything and give me something to rub when it comes time to paint the car. Alright, so back on with the boot lid. I ended up giving this, obviously, a guide coated it, a bit of a 500. A few areas I actually went over a little bit of 600, seam sealed it, and then it's ready for some wet on wet primer. I also had the boot hinges to do, which they were just in epoxy, so I gave them a bit of a 320 wet on wet primer, as you can see here. And yeah, then it's ready to start applying the base coat. Now, I 110% should have gotten more ready to do the painting because, as you can see, I still had shit everywhere. I hadn't, you know, cleaned up my shed a whole lot, and believe me, I paid for it later in the piece because I ended up having to polish the inside of this boot lid because, yeah, it had a lot of crap in it. Yeah, it was a pain in the ass, but I got there in the end. Like I say, it's not a show car, but I'm, you know, a little bit fussy. So yeah, I ended up, cutting those nibs down and giving the inside of the boot lid a bit of a polish. So this is my last coat of base coat, and the paint that I'm spraying is the Protect Paraglaze base coat, obviously. Colour is Sunburst Gold, factory colour off the HQ, and as you'll see later in the video, it's a pretty nice colour once it gets some sun on it. Sort of a strange kind of gold. It kind of looks a little bit red, a little bit orange in some lights, and then some lights would look really green, and yeah, then some lights would just look gold. So yeah, bit of an interesting colour. Alright, so now it's time for some clear coat using the Carmaster HS 2-pack clear. I think I ended up putting 3 coats on this one because I saw that there was a lot of crap, you know, in the finish. Mainly in the second coat of clear, I noticed that I had a bit more crap laying in it. So I put a 3rd coat on it because, like I said, I'd planned to polish it, and then I ended up getting a little bit of a run in one of the corners, so I ended up having to rub that out as well. But no big deal. Like I said, I was polishing it anyway, so you know, whatever happened, I suppose. This is obviously my first coat, so sort of not quite a light coat, sort of a medium wet coat. Not absolutely bombing it on. It was pretty hot when I painted this one, so yeah, it could kind of, you could lay it on a fair bit. Yeah, you'll see in the video what kind of finish I get. It's actually kind of funny looking back at this video now, because in the video it looks really clean. Like, it doesn't look like there's anything landing in the wet clear. But yeah, take my word for it, there was actually quite a bit of crap in it. And as you can see, I've got my polishing gear out, and yeah, this is what it looked like after a bit of a polish. I ended up giving it a bit of a 1200 where it needed it, and then 15, 2000, 3000, and polish it up. Now, those that have been following me on Facebook, you would know I have spent an absolute mega amount of time on this bonnet. Or maybe you wouldn't, I don't know. So I cleaned up the terrace and anti-flutter around where I've sealed up that back of the bonnet, and then it was onto some filler work. Not that it kind of needed a whole lot, but I wanted to tidy up where I'd been. Obviously, there's a few modifications on the inside of this bonnet that I just wanted to, make 100%, and then it was kind of time to move on to the next panel, I suppose. Let that epoxy dry. So with the doors, I was basically just trying to get the filler work done on them and seal them back up in epoxy, and then move on to something else. Sort of, a bit of an assembly line, I suppose. So once I was sort of done what I was doing with that door, I ended up going back to the bonnet because the epoxy had dried for long enough. So I ended up giving it a bit of a rub, refilled a few little spots. I ended up going over where the terrace and anti-flutter was with a bit of seam sealer, just because I found it finished off that area a little bit nicer. And yeah, I haven't noticed any shrinkage in it. And yeah, then I basically just put a few coats of primer on it, same as what I've done with these inner guards as well. They were in Resto finish, but then I ended up 2K priming them, just to give myself something to rub, get them ready for paint. And then it was back on with the doors. Like, yeah, it's just doors. I was absolutely flat out just rubbing these doors. So obviously, I did the filler work, rubbed the whole door, re-epoxied them, let that cure, rubbed them again, and then high-filled them. And yeah, it was quite a long time to do all of them. But yeah, it got there in the end, I suppose. These two back doors in the video now, they are ready for some high fill. And yeah, then they're obviously ready for a bit of a 500 and ready for paint. So I've started building models in my spare time when I have some. And I just thought I'd throw this one in because it kind of happened when I was doing other things, so I was pretty happy with it. But yeah, anyway, on with the doors. This is the last door that I needed to prime up. There's a few little things wrong with the frame on this one, so I just wanted to fix them up, get some high fill on them. So after the doors were all in high fill, it was then time to give them a really good 500 grit rub back, and then they're ready to paint. Now, it goes without saying, when it's time to paint these doors, obviously you really need to get them absolutely spotless. And I'm not just talking about where you're putting your colour, I'm talking about inside the door as well, because they harbour a lot of dust. And then after you think you've got it, 95% clean, absolutely go crazy masking them, because the better you do that, the less chance you're going to have any crap blowing out from inside the panel. Particularly between the frame and the skin, and then that ending in your paint. So, like the boot lid, obviously I put a wet on wet primer down. Now the reason why I do that is because I find for this stuff, to not get any rub throughs is really hard. And also because the seam sealer that I prefer to use, it's best to put a primer over the top of that. I find it sticks down a lot better rather than putting your base coat straight over the top of the seam sealer. So that's my reason behind that. And yeah, again, same clear coat as well. I mean, yeah, uniformity is the key for this sort of stuff. So that's the finished product for the inside of the doors. I was pretty happy with them, even if I did have the flu when I put the colour on. But the following morning, I ended up, it was a nice day, so I opened up the shed, dragged them outside, gave them a bit of a sunbake, and then it was on to the next thing. Now, a bit of forward planning goes a long way. So these guards on the inside of them, I wanted to get these ready to paint, even though I had something that was ready to rub and paint itself. But I figured if I do these first, then I'll have these curing, and then it's time to get stuck into the next thing, which is the inner guards. So the finish on these in the primer was basically, it didn't need really anything. So basically what I did was I ended up giving them a bit of a soft block with some sanding sponge. So 500 grit sanding sponge in like a little Dura block. And yeah, that's what I used to prep these up. So I didn't need to go at them with a really hard block because I wasn't really cutting any texture out of them or anything like that. And basically after that, I just went around any of the holes with a little file, cleaned out any build up, and then yeah, they were ready for paint. So I've said it before and I'll say it again, wet on wet primer and then my base coat for this stuff. This is my first coat of base coat, so as you can see it's a little bit transparent, but what I find is if you bomb on your base coat, not only is it going to take a longer to dry, but it's also going to really suck the gloss out of your clear coat. It doesn't matter how long you leave your base coat for, obviously you want to leave it within the recommended time, but if you put lighter coats of your base coat on, it's not going to want to suck that gloss out, is the point that I'm trying to make. So I suppose in a bit of a summary, if you put more coats on that are lighter, it is a better choice to make than putting on, say, 2 really heavy coats and then a finish coat. Now, I would assume that is the same with most paint systems, but I've noticed it to be really noticeable with the ProTech Paraglaze. If you're really heavy with your base coat, you can absolutely kill the gloss on your clear coat. Alright, so now on with the inside of the exterior guards. I was actually going to Raptor line inside these guards, but I chose not to do that because I thought it'd just be more mucking around, like another step in the process, I suppose. So I ended up just getting them ready for paint. Obviously, coat of wet on wet primer, base coat, clear coat. There's the end result. Obviously, seam sealed where I needed to seam seal. You know, not 100% finish in there, but very tidy. Sort of the look that I'm going for. And looking back on it now, I just think it's a better look anyway. I think the textured look off the Raptor liner would kind of reflect on the inner guard too much, and I think it would just stand out. Yeah, got a little run. But anyway, there they are outside. Again, like I was saying, not 100% perfect in there, but very tidy. I mean, for how much of it that you actually see once they're fitted to the car, there's nothing wrong with them. They'll be absolutely fine. I think at the end of the day, I'm like super critical on everything that I ever do. And you know, I suppose that would probably be my Achilles heel, but most people I think would be absolutely thrilled with that kind of finish, you know, where it is. But anyway, I was starting to run out of room and trestle, so it was time to start throwing some panels on the car. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of actually putting the panels on, but you know, it's a stressful job, and I think adding in the you know, the filming part of it as well would just be a nightmare. But yeah, that's the doors on. They're not 100% adjusted at this point, and you know, I'm sure when it comes time to actually blocking the car down, I'll probably end up doing a few more finer adjustments. But I just thought while I had the shell in the shed, I thought I would black out inside the plenum, and also stone guarded the inner guards as well, because obviously the stone guard will get a satin black over the top of it as well. There it is, just there, stone guard with the satin black on the inner guards. And that was just the Flow-Rite 4:1 satin black that they've got. As you can see inside the plenum, it's a bit glossy still, it was still very wet. But yeah, anyway, on with the rud support. So a little bit of filler work, not a whole lot, just a little bit just to tidy up a few bits and pieces. Give it a good rub and it's ready for some high fill or primer surfacer. Didn't really need a high fill as such, just something for me to rub. So with the rad support curing, I decided I'd whip out the nose cone, give that a bit of a rub. Obviously wet on wet primer, base coat, clear coat, same thing as everything else. You know, got a little bit creative with the masking because, you know, I needed to get into, you know, 95% of the spots that you don't see. And yeah, that's how that one came out. For what it is, I think it looks pretty good. Now this rad support, so because I wanted to have a body coloured engine bay on this car, but I hate the look of a HQ when you can see the body colour through the grille. So I ended up doing something a little bit different with this one. Obviously it got seam sealed. There was a few little rust pits where the battery tray sits, so I just filled them in and, you know, wet on wet primer after all of that stuff that I just said. And then it was ready for base coat. Now that's where things got a little bit interesting. Now, obviously, I sprayed my gold, masked out my black. I was a little bit worried about putting the fine line tape over the seam sealer, so I ended up going a little bit further down on the rad support, and it looks like crap. And then I had a few little spots where my black overspray crept through, so I ended up leaving it for the night. I gave it a rub, ended up redoing the gold, bringing the gold up to where I wanted the gold to finish, redoing my fine line masking, and then gave it a really good, probably a little bit overboard on the masking, so because I didn't want to have a repeat of the bleed through that I did in the previous application. Put on my black base coat, and then as you can see here, came out looking a lot better, and it was ready for clear coat. So that's with the clear coat on. I was pretty happy with this. Everything it flowed out nice. There was no runs, no dry spray, nothing like that. It even came out pretty clean, which is really surprising because I find when you sand your base coat, you're introducing a lot of dust into what you're working on. But even that, it was almost non-existent. If everything that I painted came out like this, I would never need to pick up a buff ever. So yeah, I was really happy with how this one turned out. So there it is in all its glory. That sunburst looks absolutely amazing in this sun. And yeah, even the black looks really good. I would love to do a jet black car, but I don't think I could handle with the upkeep of it. It'd just be an absolute nightmare. Even after 10 minutes of sitting out in the sun like that, it was already dirty. Alright, so it's finally time to start getting on with the bonnet. I actually ended up re-priming a few little spots on this. I wasn't quite happy with it, but it turned out pretty well in the end. Seam sealer is on right there, as you can see. That is the Sika 529 AT seam sealer. Personally, I think that seam sealer holds out pretty well. The only downside of it is, like I have mentioned, is you do need to put a wet on wet primer on it for the best results. But in most cases on the inside of panels, you'll be using a wet on wet primer anyway. So as you can see, base coat went on pretty well. Clear coat, I ended up putting 3 coats on this one just because there was a bit of shit. I did plan on polishing this one, but I ended up fitting it up anyway because I figured by the time the running gear is ready for this car, I'm going to have the bonnet off. The clear coat will be, 100% cured. It'll be it won't get any harder than what it is, and I'll just polish it then. Now these are the absolute bone of my existence. These are for the yellow HQ that I did, but hey, I just thought I'd throw these in anyway. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of these actually clear coated, but you get the idea. So we're starting to look a bit like a HQ again. I got the guards, or the inner guards and the guards all fitted up. Obviously the rad support is on. Pretty happy with everything. There's still obviously a bit more panel alignment that I want to sort of do, but I can sort of do that at a later date. My main goal was to just get this one back together and not spread out, over multiple sheds. But yeah, I was pretty happy with it all. I think as far as body coloured engine bays go and that very annoying mosquito, pretty happy with this one. I think if anything, the chassis probably lets it down, being that it's just a satin black, but by the time everything's all fitted up, I think it'll look pretty good. So I thought I'd chuck its actual wheels on, try and get a bit more of a feel of the car. Yeah, I think it's coming out pretty good so far. I'm pretty happy with this one. I think by the time this one's actually fully painted, I think we'll have a nice looking HQ. Not that's really a hard thing to accomplish these days, although some people do get it wrong. In my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I think you kind of can't really go wrong with the factory colours and auto drags. I know it's kind of a bit played out these days. I mean, it's been a thing, here in Adelaide for, since auto drags and HQs were a thing really, but, it's kind of a timeless look. And that's kind of the look that we're going for this car, so that's the way that we're going with it, I suppose. What else is there to say? Anyway, that's a wrap up, guys. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being patient for this video. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.